Beth Aldridge had no idea why she was pouring out her heart to a man she was sure she had never met. Maybe it was his deep blue eyes that seemed so caring. Perhaps a few gray hairs made her think of him as a wise man. Or perhaps simply because she was sure she would never see him again. Honestly, she couldn't remember the beginning of the conversation, but here she was, a 31-year-old woman, happily married for 6 years, telling a stranger her deepest, darkest secrets. "I'm cheating on my husband," she whispered almost inaudibly. This caused her new acquaintance to smile questioningly, maybe even a knowing look that said, "I don't believe you, but I'm ready to play along." "Is it true?" he answered out loud. "Tell me, Mrs. Aldridge." "Well, it's not often and only with the same two men. I'm not the type to sleep with just anyone." Tell me more. Is it because your husband is a wimp who gets pleasure from your disrespect and humiliation?" "No, never. Not at all like that. Mike is a real man. He is strong and successful. He would never have tolerated this if he knew what was happening. Perhaps he neglects you or, even worse, somehow offends you." "No, no, no, nothing like that. He is a loving and kind husband. We often enjoy intimate moments, both emotional and physical." She giggled, thinking about sharing even the smallest part of her family life with a stranger. "Then, if you don't mind, since you started, why would you cheat on a man who you say loves, supports, and takes good care of you?" "No, I don't mind since you're a complete stranger and I'll never see you again. I need to relax sometimes. I teach school composition and am respected by colleagues, students, and the community at large. Sometimes I need to be a bad girl. I want to be picked up and used as a toy. I don't want hugs, I don't want affection or conversations after. I want to be used like an ordinary woman of easy viability." Suppressing a smile, the stranger continued asking questions. "Why not just tell your husband? If he's the kind of man you describe him to be, I'm sure he'd be happy to play with you whenever your fantasy arises." "Oh God, I could never do that," Beth replied, even blushing slightly. "Mike is the best of all. I can't wait until we start having kids. I think we'll start trying after Christmas. He is my knight in shining armor. He will be the father of my children, and the man I respect more than anything in the world. I could never ask him to turn me into his bitch." "So who are these lucky people who use you as a woman of easy virtue when you have such desires?" "Dr. Davidson and Coach Glenn." "Dr. Davidson is the principal at my school and Coach Glenn is the head football coach. Previously, it was only the trainer, but Dr. Davidson caught us, and the price for his silence is a piece of my body." She blushed again, wondering how she could say such things so casually to this stranger. For the first time, a slight concern appeared on the man's face. Surprise, anxiety, and perhaps even sadness were visible in his gaze. "Well, it was quite an interesting and instructive conversation, Mrs. Aldridge. Perhaps we'll see you again someday and continue our conversation." The man rose from his chair and headed towards the door. Okay, see you." "Hey, by the way, what's your name?" she asked, but never received an answer. He disappeared. How strange, Beth thought to herself. She then picked up the phone and pressed the button, thinking she was calling her mother. She reached her sister-in-law in Poughkeepsie. 3 weeks later, Mike Aldridge was sitting in the back of O'Malley's pub in downtown Sterling, Virginia, about 20 minutes from his home in Reston. "Please have a seat," Mike suggested, motioning for the waiter. "What will you drink? I'll treat you." Davidson ordered Coors Light and Glenn ordered Michelob Ultra. While they waited, Mike decided to move on to the topic of conversation, placing his phone in the center of the table. "Look at this," he said. "This is a shortened version of a longer recording that lasts about an hour. It's only 90 seconds. The first part of the clip began with a shot of Beth Aldridge having sex in Davidson's office. When the camera pulled back, a clock could be seen on the wall. They showed at 18:30. "Damn," Davidson whispered in a shocked voice. Glenn was already starting to sweat. He knew what would happen next. The stage was his office. It was dimly lit, clearly late in the evening. From the angle on the screen, he realized that it was about 3 weeks ago, on a Friday night after a big victory over competitors from a nearby city. He remembered that Beth had sent Mike home after the game, saying it was her turn to clean up. This shot was even more compromising. Beth had sex with the coach. It was clear that they did not use protection. Mike stopped the recording and the waiter brought the beer. "Mike, listen," Glenn began. "Shut up, you piece of shit." "And you," Mike growled, pointing his finger at the director's face, doing everything possible to remain calm. "Don't you dare say a word." Mike continued. "What have I ever done to you to make me so disrespected? Of course, my wife is a woman of easy virtue, but none of you should have agreed to her betrayal. You could just walk away. I didn't expect you to warn me, that would have been too much. But that's not the same as having sex with her and belittling me in the process." Neither man could meet his gaze. Mike continued. "I have no doubt that you, Glenn, did it first. This in itself is already bad, but you, Ed, blackmailing her with your silence in exchange for sex is beyond contempt. It turns out that my loving and faithful wife is not so loving and certainly not faithful. I'll deal with her in my own time and way, but for now I'm going to deal with you too." Both men began to look even more worried. Each of them was a public figure with well-paid and respected jobs. Both were in their mid-40s, mid-career. Both had families. Glenn was married and had 2 children, one a senior in high school and the other a freshman. Davidson has 3 children, the oldest just entering high school. The stakes were high, and they both realized that the man opposite held all the cards. "Don't think for a second that I'll feel sorry for both of you. I'm here to tell you what happens next. At least I'm giving you fair warning about the problems ahead, something you don't seem to have seen fit to do for me. Davidson, let's start with you. You are leaving the field of education forever. I don't care what you do or where you go, but you resign at the end of the semester. You have 6 weeks to sort your shit out. I had about 2 minutes before my world collapsed, so don't think about telling me I'm being unfair or arbitrary. By next Monday, I want the entire school district to know you're leaving. I want my phone to blow up with messages like, 'Did you hear? Is Principal Davidson resigning?' And besides, your sweet wife Cheryl will find out what a shitty husband she chose. By the time you get home, she will have received a package containing irrefutable evidence that you had sex with Beth in your office, on your couch, and on your desk. I'm sure you've probably had sex with Cheryl there before. Most couples play games like that from time to time. Good luck explaining to her why she wasn't good enough for you and you had to look elsewhere." "Mike, please," Davidson tried to intervene with tears in his eyes. "I told you to shut up," Mike hissed. "You didn't care about me, so I'm just responding to you with the same friendship that you honored me with." Ed just hung his head. At that moment, Glenn realized where this was going. "Don't you dare play this on me, Aldridge. I'll kill you. Don't even think about poking your nose into my affairs or touching my family." Mike paused for a moment, trying not to laugh or explode in rage. "Coach, I know you were once a big deal in the NCAA, and you think you're still one of those tough guys. But those days are long gone, and if you want, we can go out to the parking lot right now, take off our jackets, and sort it out like a man. I promise you, I will beat the crap out of you, and then I will drag you home so your wife can beat you too. Honestly, there's nothing I'd enjoy more than beating the crap out of you." There was something in Mike's voice and his gaze that silenced Phil Glenn. Mike continued. "This applies to you too, Coach. You're leaving, and you are leaving now. You'll hand this piece of shit your resignation letter over the weekend. I know your team is great this season, and I'm not going to give you a chance to win a regional or even a state title and walk away on top. I don't care what excuse you make, but you're leaving school now. To be clear, if any of you don't do what I said, everyone, the school board, the teachers, your family, and as many people in the community as possible will be sent these videos before you can blink. I have 2 very tech-savvy friends who are already working on a mailing list as we speak. And one more thing. If anything were to happen to me in the next few years, I left very specific instructions for more crap to fall on both of you than you can imagine. To prove I'm not bluffing, listen to this. Mike picked up the phone, and all three heard Coach Glenn say, "Don't you dare play this on me, Aldridge, I'll kill you." Glenn's jaw dropped. "You are both complete idiots. How the hell did you end up living like this by being so stupid? Did you think I came here unprepared? Did you really think that if you threatened me, I would just curl up into a ball and become some kind of wimp? By the way, to add a little sweetness to this pie, Davidson, I have a tape of you having sex with Mrs. Michaels from the science department, and you, Glenn, have a tape of Tina McVeigh that just came out last year. Ed, do you know Bob Michaels? Sergeant Major Bob Michaels, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marine Division. I promise you, he won't be as nice as me." Turning to Glenn, Mike continued, "And you idiot, I'm sure Senator McVeigh from the great state of New York knows a lot of people who would be happy to help get rid of the sick idiot who seduced his daughter." Mike Aldridge stood up from the table and threw two 20s on the table. "Questions, gentlemen?" Only silence answered him. "Great. Enjoy your beer at my expense." He turned around and left. 10 minutes later, as the two men staggered out of O'Malley's pub, their wives received packages from FedEx. The quiet life to which they were accustomed ended once and for all. On the way home, Mike dialed another number. When the phone was picked up, he said only one word and hung up: "Forward." Over the next 24 hours, the sergeant major learns of his wife's betrayal. Mike did some research on it. A guy from the wrong side of town who made his way in life and became a decent person. He served with honor. He deserved to know the truth. Mike was glad the Marines' children were grown and no longer living with them. It was a small consolation, but still something. Mike didn't need to contact the senator. He was sure that he had long known that his daughter was far from an angel dressed in white. "Now it's time to take care of my wife." Beth Aldridge was at home relaxing with a glass of wine after a difficult week at school. Mid-October has always been a difficult time. The novelty of the school year has already worn off, and the Christmas holidays are still 2 months away. She was looking forward to weekends with her husband to do some yard work, go to the farmer's market, and maybe start planning a little earlier for expanding their family. This thought made her smile. Beth truly believed that she loved Mike. They met on a blind date 7 years ago, and she took an immediate liking to him. Tall, with a manly figure and a kind heart, she knew that he was a worthy man. After the first date, Mike called her 15 minutes later and asked her out for a second date. At first, she thought that she would make him wait a little and not answer the phone, but the thought that he might not call back gave her an unexpected fear. She answered the third ring. They dated for about a month and then became an exclusive couple. Mike didn't try to sleep with her right away. She realized that loyalty and respect were important to him. Their first kiss was cautious because Mike didn't want to jump to conclusions. For such a smart guy, he's obviously not very good at taking hints, Beth thought before running into his arms. 5 months later, rumors began to circulate that Mike had bought a ring. Beth had her spies and tried to hide her excitement, but when Mike invited her to Fiola, one of Washington's 5-star restaurants, she could barely contain her excitement. Getting down on one knee right after dessert, Mike asked her to marry him. The audience must have been aware because everyone rose and toasted marriage, happiness, and long life. Beth always smiled when she remembered that night. Mike wanted to wait until the honeymoon to have sex, not because he was some kind of prude, but because he wanted Beth to know that she was more than just a woman to him. She was the only one he would ever love. Their sexual relationship was merely an extension of his deep devotion to her. Mike had been with several women before her, but now he was the only one for her and thought that waiting until marriage was the right thing to do. He was that man. Beth, on the contrary, was so in love that she was ready to give herself to him right away. She did not insist, since their engagement was short by Virginia standards only 3 months. However, one evening when Mike came to pick up wedding invitations to take them to the post office, Beth had a plan. She answered the door wearing one of his best shirts, but accidentally spilled some wine on it. She could see that he was slightly annoyed, but he was going to be kind to his clumsy lover. "Mike, I'm so sorry," Beth said, biting her lower lip and falling onto the couch so that he could clearly see what would be his. I'm so clumsy. I finished sorting out the invitations, and now I ruined everything. I know you told me to be careful and not eat or drink near the papers, but I was a bad girl and didn't listen. I wanted some wine, so here it is. Thought you'd never know. Mike's eyes lit up with desire and anger, but he remained silent and folded his hands, simply looking down at her. Mike, Beth whispered tenderly, I'm such a bad girl, I need a lesson. Will you teach me, Mike? Will you show your fiancé what happens to naughty girls when they don't listen? It was obvious. Beth won, Mike lost. 5 minutes later, they were already in her bed, indulging in passion. Mike learned an important lesson that night. His future wife could seduce him whenever she pleased. He promised himself to never discuss serious matters with her again, unless she was fully clothed and at a sufficient distance. A month before the wedding, a marriage contract was signed. Mike made it clear how he felt about loyalty and commitment. No one will receive a reward for treason. If either spouse betrays the other, they will leave the marriage with very little. The ringing of wedding bells, a magical honeymoon in France, and the first 6 years of their marriage were better than most couples. They had arguments sometimes, but mostly Mike was busy showing Beth how much he appreciated her, and Beth was busy making sure her husband knew she adored and respected him. Beth sat on the couch, thinking about all this, and her guilt slowly began to rise to the surface. What made her sleep with 2 men who felt nothing for her other than professional curiosity? Why did she allow these men to treat her so roughly and use her as their personal toy? And why were they married, with wives and children? Beth didn't know where this desire came from and didn't seek help from a trusted friend or even a counselor. Instead, from time to time, she simply made herself available to Coach Glenn or Dr. Davidson. Always after hours, always with a reliable alibi, but always at school. It was so exciting. 2 weeks ago, she even thought about letting both of them have sex with her at the same time. There was a work seminar scheduled for Martin Luther King weekend in January, and all 3 of them were going to attend without their spouses. She thought about the look on their faces when they walked into her room together and found her in one of Mike's Princeton t-shirts and short panties. Making sure Mike was humiliated in some way in the process was always part of the game. Again, she didn't know why this was so important to her, but the thought excited her. But on evenings like tonight, she was overcome with contradictions. Mike was amazing. Why did she risk his love for cheap and ultimately meaningless sex? 3 months ago, Beth had a minor health scare. It turned out to be just tonsillitis, and she spent the night in hospital after surgery. Mike was there, caring for her with love and tenderness, as always. None of her lovers even bothered to send her a get-well message. She knew she was stupid, but she also knew she wouldn't stop. Her thoughts were interrupted when the front door of their apartment opened. Mike came in. Beth immediately knew something was wrong. She stood up to greet him with a hug and a kiss. "Hello, dear. How was your day? Was everything okay?" Mike pulled away, which was unusual for him. "No, Beth, no hugs. It was a terrible day, and the last few weeks have been the same for me. But I wasn't ready to discuss this with you until today. Why don't we sit down at the kitchen table?" Mike turned away and took a bottle of water from the refrigerator. No alcohol for this conversation. Beth followed him, worried. It never occurred to her that her husband could find out about her adventures, and that their marriage, along with the life she loved so much, was hanging by a thread. "What happened, Mike? You're scaring me, honey." Mike sighed wearily, straight out of the cheater's playbook. Show surprise and show that you don't understand what you could have done to upset him. He knew that this was where she would start and was ready to give her a second chance to confess. If she does this, perhaps their marriage will have a chance. "Beth, please think carefully and honestly. Is there something you need to tell me about our marriage?" "What are you talking about, Mike? What should I tell you? It's obvious you're upset, but I don't understand why. Tell me what's going on so I can help you, darling." Mike took a deep breath. Typical move. He was ready to give her a second chance. "Beth, I'm asking you again. Is there anything you want to share about how you behave in our marriage? Beth ignored the second opportunity to confess. Mike, to be honest, I have no idea what you're talking about. I love you with all my heart. I love our marriage and our life together. I can't wait until we start having kids, raising them, and growing old together. With these words, she tried to take his hands. The look on Mike's face was one of sad confidence as he pulled his hands away. "Don't, Beth," he said with weariness in his voice. "Don't touch me." Now her eyes were filled with tears. "Mike, what's going on? Please tell me." Mike took the phone out of his pocket and placed it on the table. After pressing a few buttons, he said in a low voice, "This is what's happening, Beth," and turned on the recording. Beth heard and saw. Beth screamed, "No." Before she could react further, Mike stopped the recording. Beth sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "Beth, look at me." She continued to sob, rocking back and forth, choking on her tears. "Beth," Mike said, his voice loud and commanding. "Look at me right now." Beth raised her head sharply, as if Mike had never spoken to her in that tone, or his loud voice had brought her back to reality. Anyway, she looked at him. "Before we continue, you should know that I have similar clips of you and Ed Davidson." Beth's eyes widened in horror. "No, Mike, please no," was all she could say. "Beth, I'm going to go out for an hour for a walk. You need time to collect your thoughts, because obviously this discovery came as a complete shock to you." She started to protest, but he raised his hand to stop her. "I'm not leaving, Beth. I'm just giving you space to come to your senses. When I get back, we can talk if you want, or I'll give you another day or two since we have the weekend. I insist that by Sunday evening we will definitely talk, but until then, decide for yourself when you are ready." With that, Mike went upstairs to change into sweatpants, an old Princeton sweatshirt, and an ancient VMI baseball cap that he had worn for 20 years. Somehow, this old hat calmed him. When Mike came back downstairs, Beth was still sitting in the kitchen, silently crying. He left the house and headed to the local park, which was nearby and had a 2-mile walking path. There were some good climbs, so Mike got the blood flowing a little. As he walked, many random but interconnected thoughts flashed through his head. Will she start with the classic excuses? Will she do something to herself while I'm gone? How will family and friends react if or when they find out? I hope Davidson and Glenn's wives are already in the process of kicking them the hell out. His walk turned into a run, and by the time he headed back home, he had run 6 miles. He was physically exhausted, but his mind became clearer. When he returned through the side door into the kitchen, Beth was gone. For a moment, he was overcome with fear, but then he heard the sound of water in the shower and was glad that his wife had come to her senses. He took a quick shower in the guest bathroom and was waiting for her in the kitchen when she returned. She stopped and looked at him. Her gaze was directed at him, but now she noticed the difference. His eyes were still the same blue as always, but weren't they a little colder now? Did a toughness emerge in them, or was it her imagination? She took the water and sat down opposite him. "Mike, thank you for giving me time to recover. You could have attacked me right away, and you would have had every right to do so. I appreciate you giving me a chance to collect my thoughts so we can talk. You act much kinder than I would if I were you." Mike nodded but didn't say anything. "I want to talk a little now, if possible," she continued. Again, Mike simply nodded in response. "I know you probably don't believe me, but I really love you. I have no feelings for these men, and to be honest, I don't know what drives me to behave this way. It doesn't happen often, maybe once every 2 months, but when this urge appears, it's like I lose control and can't stop until I satisfy it. It might sound like an addiction, and maybe it really is, but it doesn't affect my feelings for you." Mike was still silent, listening to her. "I didn't have any injuries or anything like that. There are no dark secrets in my family. I had guys in college who were a little rough, but nothing weird or abnormal. However, even before meeting you, I had the need for rough sex from time to time." At this point, Beth paused. When Mike didn't respond, she asked, "Mike, can you say something? It's important for me to know what you're thinking. Mike sighed. Beth, I know that you truly believe that you love me. I have no doubt that you are sincere in your words, but forgive me if I don't believe you. Love is a commitment to being together. Before I saw evidence of your betrayal and heard it from your own lips, I was not even aware of this side of your personality. How can you hide something so important from the person you supposedly love? I'm glad you were never used against your will, but you betrayed me and broke my trust. Let me ask, have you ever discussed this with anyone? Did you seek help to figure this out, even if you were hesitant to discuss it with me? No, Mike, I wasn't looking for help. I was probably too embarrassed to go to a counselor and say, help me understand why every 6 weeks I turn into an overweight prostitute with someone who is not my husband. You realize how hard that would be, right? Of course it would be hard and humiliating, but shouldn't true love make it worthwhile? Shouldn't love for your spouse make you seek answers to strengthen your marriage rather than destroy it? So what, Mike? Did I ruin our marriage? Did I ruin your love for me? What do you think, Beth? You yourself said that you would not have love and patience for me if the situation was reversed. Now you want me to fix everything for you. How long will it be before you find someone new and we're back where we started? How do I know that Davidson and Glenn are the only ones who used you as a prostitute? Were there others, Beth? Beth didn't answer, just lowered her head. Damn it, Mike breathed. I don't want to know the details, Beth, but how many were there and how long did it last? I think I have a right to know because I need to see a doctor and get tested for diseases. No one when we got engaged and in the first year of our marriage. I thought that all this was a thing of the past, but when I started working as a teacher, it came back with renewed vigor. In 4 years, there were 2 more men before Ed and Phil. So, 4 years out of 6 of our marriage. Yes. Mike stood up and headed towards the door. Mike, please, you said we could talk. I need you to listen to me and support me. Please promise that we will make everything right. Sorry, Beth, but no promises. Now and maybe never. You have been deceiving and betraying me all this time. Don't ask me to do something you never planned to do yourself. If you need a guy for fun, I'm sure you won't have any problems finding someone to comfort you. Beth shuddered at these words. Mike was many things, but he was never cruel. Mike, please, when will you be back? No idea, he replied and left. Mike didn't keep to himself. He was definitely suffering. He loved Beth, not perfectly, but the best he knew how. He believed that she loved him too, so this all felt like a punch to the gut. Mike spent the next 2 days in seclusion, ignoring Beth's messages and avoiding communication with her. He understood that he would need to take a few personal days from work, which was something unusual for him. However, he was confident that his boss would meet him halfway. Mike was known as a tough but fair man who always got the job done. He was valued at the company, and a little slack shouldn't have been a problem. Early in his career, Mike refused to do business with an Asian company after learning that they were using child labor in their production. His boss was furious at the time, until Mike gave him all the facts and suggested he leave for a competitor, taking his growing list of satisfied clients with him. As a result, the Asian company was asked to leave. Mike was not naive or blameless, but he had his own code of honor, which he did not violate, and thanks to this, he more than once saved his company from scandals both public and private. Those who mistook his ethics for weakness were quickly convinced of the opposite. He could be ruthless when needed, but he would never harm innocent people. So when Mike called his boss asking for a few days off, his manager, Gail Sharp, willingly gave it to him. Mike promised to be back by next Monday and assured Gail that everything was under control, especially the deal with the Andersons. On Monday afternoon, Beth again begged Mike to come home and talk. He was home on Saturday morning only to pack a few things and left again until Beth left for groceries. Why should I go home, Beth? He asked over the phone. Please, Mike, just come home so we can talk. Mike decided it might be worth listening to her. An hour later, they were sitting at the kitchen table again. I couldn't stop thinking about this all weekend, Mike, she began, and I think I've found a solution for us. I want to tell you about this. It's funny, Beth. You didn't bother to tell me, either before the wedding or after, about your itch. You just cheated behind my back with 4 different men. And now you came up with a solution yourself without ever asking me about my opinion or feelings. Now you are going to tell me what we will do to compensate for your dirty betrayal and the fact that you have become a woman of easy virtue. Damn it, Mike, I'm doing my best to be part of the solution, not the problem. If you're just going to destroy me, I don't know what to do. Get lost, Beth. You have no right to be angry with me. Do you know that you never told me how wrong you were in betraying me? You have never once offered an ounce of genuine remorse for what you have done or the grief you have caused. So forgive me if I'm not interested in your decision until you've shown an ounce of regret or remorse for the harm you've caused. I saw the pain on your face from being caught, but I didn't see an ounce of shame for hurting me and betraying our trust. But I want to fix it, Mike. I am ashamed of my actions and the pain they caused. Maybe I didn't express it correctly, but I really feel it all. Haven't you ever tripped over your words? Of course, Beth, but words always reflect what we think and feel. You want me to believe that your regrets are genuine and that you will change. I don't doubt your sincerity, but I refuse to be the victim of words that never included an admission of guilt or a request for forgiveness. You want the pain to stop so we can continue our marriage. But one thing is clear. You want to do without admitting your guilt and destroying our union. So what now, Mike? Beth asked, on the verge of tears. I think you need to think about a solution that suits you, and I'll look for something that suits me. I don't like this, Mike. This sounds threatening to us, and I didn't like to find out that my wife has an itch that she won't ask me to scratch and is turning into a woman of easy virtue for other men, Beth. We'll both have to get used to disappointment, Mike said and left their house again. Mike wasn't moping. He was definitely injured. He loved Beth, although not perfectly, but to the limit of his capabilities. He was sure that she also sincerely loved him, so this betrayal was a terrible blow for him. Mike spent a lot of time thinking through possible scenarios for what to do next. Usually, he and Beth discussed important decisions together. He always appreciated her prudence and wisdom. But after her betrayal, everything changed in the blink of an eye. He found himself alone, trying to figure out what to do. In the end, he boiled it down to 4 possible options. Option 1. Ask Beth to get serious help, hoping she will change so they can save the marriage. Plus, there will be no public scandal. The downside is that Mike will never be able to truly trust her again, no matter how sincere she is. Besides, he will always know that he was played like a fool. In his profession, once a man comes to terms with this state of affairs, he can safely draw a target on his chest. The second option, make her suffer punishment, give him a free pass for the same amount of time as she cheated on him. But Mike didn't want to sleep with other women, and this option would make him no better than her. Option 3, take a break for 6 months through legal separation and see where they end up at the end of that time. But Beth was unlikely to remain faithful, and he didn't want to control her or check whether she remained celibate. Fourth option, the only good option. Their relationship must end and Beth must pay for her sins. This should happen quietly, without public showdowns, but she will remember for the rest of her life that she betrayed and deceived him. Mike was sure it would take time, but it would be worth it. Mike spent the next week quietly developing his plan. Then I returned to it again and again, checking for errors, gaps, or obvious mistakes. The first version of the BTBB plan, Burn That Bitch Beth, looked completely different from the final version. He made some very careful calls and had one serious personal meeting with a man who owed him a lot and happily agreed to repay the debt after hearing Mike's explanation. While Mike was hatching a plan for revenge, he heard through friends that Principal Davidson and Coach Glenn had not only resigned, but were also getting a divorce. Details were vague and no names were given, but it was clear that both men had paid for their sins of adultery. On Thursday evening, Mike called his boss, Gail. "Boss, tomorrow I'm flying to New York to meet with Anderson's team. I'll be there all day, but by the end of the day, we'll have a solution that suits everyone." Gail was pleased. "Great, Mike. You always do your job. We appreciate it. How are your personal affairs? Everything is fine? Yes, boss, everything is settled, although there were a couple of difficult days. Thank you for meeting me halfway. Mike flew to New York, and from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. was completely immersed in working with the Anderson team. As promised, by the time he left the office, he had a signed contract in his briefcase. In Virginia, meanwhile, Beth took a week off. She was depressed, but after a few days, she began to return to her normal routine. She usually ran 2 or 3 times a week in the park, where Mike had distressed the previous week. The park's 2-mile trail was ideal for her jogging, and there were no security cameras other than those in the parking lot. Later, when police obtained a warrant to review the footage, they saw Beth go for a run at the park around 10 a.m. for the next 8 hours. The recording showed everything except her return. The film did not show her leaving the park. Mike boarded a plane back to Washington, picked up his car, and headed home. After taking a shower and having dinner, he drank beer. At 8 p.m. local time, Mike put on his headphones and turned on the laptop, which had been discreetly slipped into his bag at LaGuardia by a specialist whose actions were not noticed by security cameras. Later that evening, the man showed up in Mike's yard to pick up the laptop. No one else saw either the person or the laptop in these parts. When Mike turned on the screen, he was greeted with an image of a very scared Beth. She was dressed in her gym clothes, but her hands were handcuffed to the table in front of her. It was clear that she was on a private jet. As soon as she saw Mike, she burst into tears. "Mike, please tell me what's going on. I'm scared. Who are these people?" "Beth, this is my solution to your problem with betrayal, lies, and deceit," Mike said with cold confidence. "I told you that you should come up with a plan for yourself. Looks like mine was ready faster than yours. What does this mean, Mike? Are you sending me somewhere so you can sleep with other women? I'll let you have your fun. I owe you that. There's no need to kidnap me. Please tell them to bring me home. Sorry, Beth, but it won't work. You see, I sold you to these people. Now you belong to them. They paid good money for you. Look at this." Mike showed her $100 bill. "Sold me? What do you mean? You don't own me. I'm not your slave. I demand that these people let me go." "Well, Beth, in these people's culture, I do own you, and I have the right to sell you if you let me down. I'd say cheating on other men behind my back is an epic fail, wouldn't it?" "But Mike," Beth began, but Mike interrupted her. "Beth, shut up and listen. You have destroyed me on such a deep level that I may never be able to trust people again. You made me a laughing stock, like I was a wimp. You lied, deceived, betrayed, and made a mockery of my love for you. In the end, you broke me. Now I will pay you back this debt and break you. As the French say, I will be ruthless, my love." "No, Mike, you can't do that. Forgive me. Please let me go home. Sorry, dear, but you are already leaving for your new home. These people are part of an Eastern European consortium that owns houses in 6 different countries. I don't know which location they're taking you to, but considering that you like to give yourself to men who don't love you and be used, I helped you find your dream job. You belong to them now, and they will use you however they want." "Nuo," Beth screamed, and one of the men hit her. "Shut up, bitch, or I'll throw you out of this plane." "Beth, we only have a few minutes left. As I said, you destroyed my love and hurt my heart deeply, so now you will reap what you sow. People will miss you. Your parents will probably be heartbroken to realize that they will never see their daughter again. But no one will come to your aid. You will never be free again. These people are masters of their craft, and they leave no trace. Now you are their woman of easy virtue, and you will work for them for the rest of your life." Mike finished. "Oh yeah, by the way, there's something else you should know. People who recover from anesthesia sometimes reveal amazing things." There was a short pause before the screen went dark. This was enough time for Mike to see how Beth finally understood how he found out about her infidelities. She herself told him everything under anesthesia after tonsil surgery. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Beth sat bent over and cried quietly. But soon she will find out what her new life is. One of the three men in the plane's cabin gave the others a sinister grin and said in Russian, "Well, guys, let's try our new purchase." Beth started her new job. In the following days, Mike reported Beth missing. Police conducted a thorough investigation for more than 2 years before admitting that the case had reached a dead end. Mike was questioned several times, but no evidence was found linking him to his wife's disappearance. The legal team of Lee, Hamilton, and Fox took good care of him. Although the case was still active, Mike was free and clear of the law. He continued to make significant progress at work, but did not begin new relationships. Beth was never seen or heard from again. Dr. Davidson drives a UPS truck in Charleston, West Virginia, and Coach Glenn owns a rundown store in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Both lost almost everything in their divorces and rarely saw their children. Both of their wives remarried. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next